It is Thursday, March 26th of 2026, and this is Washington in Focus Daily. I'm Carleen Johnson, the Center Square state government reporter. And Governor Bob Ferguson, when will you sign the income tax? He's got until Tuesday of next week to sign Senate Bill 6346. Maybe he'll veto a section or two of that. We do not know. There was no indication, though, that he won't sign it. Not on the schedule for today and his bill signing. In fact, it was curious. Today's bill signing in Seattle, there was only one bill on the agenda for signage. So we've looked ahead to tomorrow. It's not scheduled at this point for Friday. So perhaps folks are right in suggesting that he's going to wait until the very last possible day to sign this bill into law. So there is, again, that growing consensus that the reason he's pushing it off until potentially the very last day he can sign is maybe to give less time for opponents to put together an initiative to repeal the income tax, or the tax on millionaires, as supporters call it. So two lawmakers weigh in on that idea in today's episode. And then Washington State set a record a lot of people didn't want us to set yesterday when the price of diesel reached $6.53 a gallon. So for the trucking industry, this is crushing. For school districts and all those school buses, this is a huge hit. So I've got some numbers for you and a conversation with the owner of Fast Weight Freight out of Spokane. Interesting kind of how they're adjusting. Imagine if you're in Spokane, you're just 15 minutes across the border to Idaho, you might want to fill your trucks up there. And that's what they're doing. And with the ongoing affordability crisis, a state lawmaker was able to get a bill through and signed by the governor to let people receiving pension payments, smaller pension payments, to take a lump sum payout. So instead of getting a $50 or a $100 check a month, this may help a lot of people receiving those pension payouts if they just take all of it in a lump sum and without penalty. So that's what this bill that got signed by the governor, it was actually unanimous through both chambers, which is kind of surprising. There are not too many pieces of legislation in Washington offered by a Republican that get through unanimously. So we'll get into that. Right. So diving in, we keep checking Governor Ferguson's schedule on the income tax bill, which, assuming he signs it, is going to create an income tax for Washingtonians who make more than $1 million. That also includes total dual income. So husband and wife together make combined income of more than $1 million. Anything above that $1 million threshold will be taxed each year at a rate of 9.9%. This takes effect January 1st of 2028, and the first payments for that would be due in April of 2029 when people have to pay their taxes. Opponents, of course, hope to repeal this before it even has a chance to be collected. So I spoke with Representative Travis Couture, Republican of Allen, about the delay of the governor in signing the bill and what he makes of that.
He'll probably push it out as long as he possibly can because that's less days that you have to get signatures on a ballot initiative. Number one, and number two, he probably wants to make a big show out of it, invite a bunch of supporters. And there's not many of them in Washington State, but he'll find the ones that he wants to invite and make a big show out of signing this thing. It's just devastating. I mean, I warned on the final passage of the bill, I told the speaker, we don't have to wait for the Capitol flight. It's already been happening. We got a chart out on, people could look at the Washington House Republican Caucus's social media page. We published a little chart that was showing the Capitol flight and the loss of revenue that our state has had since the enactment, basically, of the capital gains income tax. And then, what is still to be shown is how much capital flight we had because of an increase in the estate tax, which is a tax for people to die. And then Now with this income tax, all I see every single day is another business, another individual, who has been successful in their life moving away. And I think it's imperative that people understand that when the wealthy, so to speak, or the millionaires move away, or the pass-through entities, the businesses, the small businesses who maybe make some money over $1 million and put it into their reserves, when they move to other states, that's jobs. That's local tax revenue for your counties and your cities and for your police departments and your fire departments. And when those office locations or those brick and mortar locations vacate, those property tax levies get spread. And where do they get spread? They get spread to the middle class and the lower income people because there's no one left to pay it.
Representative Jim Walsh of Aberdeen, who chairs the state Republican Party, also speculates that Governor Ferguson is delaying his signature to squeeze that window for a potential initiative repeal. But he told me this week that he is really hoping the initiative effort, regardless of that squeezed, narrowed window, that it's going to come this year instead of next year. And here's why he thinks that's a good idea.
I think if you look back on the history of how initiatives like this fare, they do better in higher turnout election years, which would be 2026 instead of 2027. Remember, the best are the big election years. So try to get on a gubernatorial or presidential election year, you get better turnout. But this is a midterm year, and so you got Congress races and you got ledge races, you get more turnout. We like that better than 2027 when historically in those odd numbered years you get even lower voter turnout. Now, some people will tell you, no, depending on the initiative, you want lower voter turnout. I don't buy that. I think we want, kind of touching back on our other issue, we want higher voter turnout because I think the more people vote, the better the result.
So I want to remind you there are already two initiatives that are on the November ballot this year, backed by Let's Go Washington. The measure to protect girls in sports and not allow trans athletes to compete against girls. And which is interesting given what the IOC said this week when they said no longer we're having, trans athletes compete against women. The International Olympic Committee weighing in on that this week was pretty significant. But the other bill is the parental rights restoration. Initially, that was passed by the legislature, and then they came back a year later with House Bill 1296 and basically undid every bit of those parental rights. So the other initiative is to restore that back to its original intent. So there are opponents, including the Washington Education Association and other left leaning interest groups, that are already mobilizing big time to push back on this. So this is to be considered as well. If there is, in fact, an income tax repeal initiative that ends up, qualifying for the ballot this year, do backers like Let's Go Washington and others have enough money to advertise for all three of those and explain those for the general public? Do opponents have the resources to mount sort of a three-pronged resistance to all of those initiatives? So that is something that everyone is talking about behind the scenes. There is lots of discussion on best strategies for that at this point. While we wait to see when the governor will sign this, assuming he does, again, Tuesday is his deadline to sign that legislation. So this is not good news. I drove down the street to a local gas station, a Shell station near me today to see the price of diesel. You can see that here. Of course, you get a little bit of a break if you pay for cash, but how many people filling up a rig that takes, well over $100 a gallon to fill? Most likely of diesel is going to have cash on hand to do that. Most people are paying with a debit or credit card. So, in Washington State on Wednesday, diesel hit an all-time record of 6.53 a gallon, according to AAA Washington, as you can see here. Um, It's the same price today. It went down like a zero or a hundredth of a cent or something like that today. It's basically still 6.53 a gallon. Um, and it is, again, as I mentioned, a new record. The trucking industry is feeling this big time here in Washington, and school districts as well. Regular gas, I should say, for all you filling up if you are gonna do that at some point in the next day or two. It's 5.30 a gallon on average in Washington today. That is up nearly a dollar from a month ago. So this morning I had a fascinating conversation with Jeff Bozma. He is the owner of Fastway Freight. They're headquartered in Spokane, but they've got two other terminals, one in East Wenatchee and the other in North Idaho, and they operate a fleet of more than 50 company-owned trucks and as many drivers. So these are not independent drivers. They own the rigs, and they're the truck drivers are their employees. So he explained that in many cases, when there's a spike in diesel, although it's never been this great for anybody, they can tack on a fuel charge for most of their customers. About 90%, he said, they can do that with their contracts, but others, they can't charge the customer a higher price and they just have to eat it. And he told me several of their drivers do work a route that takes them every day into Idaho. So that's where they're filling up their tanks, as you might imagine, at a huge cost savings. Remember, here in Washington, we pay much higher fuel prices because of our higher state gas taxes and because of the Climate Commitment Act, which tacks on another 50 cents or more to every gallon of fuel.
90% of our freight, we can get a fuel surcharge on it. But that always lags. It's almost impossible over the years. We've seen it before. Fuel hasn't really jumped this fast, this high, but we've always been able to get that fuel surcharge on there. For the most part, we have a few accounts that are locked in. Those are the ones that sting the most. But there's always a lag behind getting that fuel surcharge on and the increase in that price. So you still take a hit for sure. It's certainly not 100% coverage. We're only 15 miles from the Idaho border from where we're at here. So any of our trucks that go, we have many trucks daily that go into Idaho. So we've just had those trucks make sure they always, once they start coming back, that they fuel up before they come back to Washington. And but it's usually 50 cents to $1 is the difference. And I would say a good average is probably 70 to 72 cents that I've seen. I've been kind of tracking it, over the last year, just kind of watching it. It's usually around 70, 72 cents difference.
So for one guy filling up his truck, doing it in Idaho instead of Washington and saving, say it's 72 cents, how much is that saving you with that guy filling up at that amount? I don't know how many gallons he's filling up.
Yeah, a typical truck is probably, a lot of trucks are about 200 gallons. Some are, less than that, but let's just say you have a smaller tanks because like our trucks go out and back every day. 100 gallons, right? 70 cents. There's $70. I'm just going to say that truck fuels up, maybe not every day, but it's even 3 days a week, right? There's $210 a week. Those are big numbers pretty soon.
So I reached out to a few local school districts this morning. I only got a response back in time for this podcast from the Auburn School District in South King County. They got more than 17,000 students, 28 schools, I believe it is, 26 or 28 schools. And their school buses run on diesel, of course. So they're being hit by the diesel hike, but it's even a bigger hit than I imagined. And Vicki Alonzo, who is the communications director for the Auburn School District, emailed me some information. She said in January of this year, they were paying $2.87 a gallon for unleaded, and for diesel. And then March 18th, $4.67 a gallon. So that's before all of this went up dramatically, right? You've got diesel prices now, as I mentioned, that are well over $6 a gallon. They get 4 fuel times per month where they get like a fuel dump, the cost of what they call a refueling drop. So 4 a month. They said that has increased $23,000 per fuel drop. So if these prices continue, she said their fuel costs are increasing at a rate of $100,000 every month. That's just one school district out of the 295 school districts here in the state of Washington because of this spike in diesel fuel. Eventually, that likely translates into the school districts or the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction coming back to lawmakers next year and saying, we need some help. And so they'll probably going to ask for more money, and taxpayers will be on the hook, to replenish the extra fuel costs for our school districts across the state of Washington. All right, now to signing of a bill that may end up helping quite a few families, potentially thousands of families in the state of Washington who are struggling to make ends meet. So on Monday, Governor Ferguson signed House Bill 2124. This was sponsored by Representative Travis Couture of Allen. He shared some of his comments on the income tax with us earlier in this episode. This is a bill that really kind of modernizes how small pension benefits are paid out in our state. It's a fix of, what he refers to as an outdated threshold, really, in the state's retirement system. So under current law, the Department of Retirement Systems can only offer a lump sum payout if a retiree's monthly benefit is $50 a month or less. So this bill raises that threshold to $250 a month or less and says if you're in that, area, you can instead get a lump sum payout. And that might really benefit a whole lot of people in our state right now who are struggling. So here is Representative Couture discussing signing of his bill by the governor in this critical time when so many Washington families are struggling.
And so, as we're looking at this affordability crisis that we're in with the cost of gas, groceries, rent, insurance, healthcare, childcare, you name it, everything is through the roof. We're some of the highest cost of living in all of the 50 states, and all very bad in all of those measurable categories that I mentioned. And so, mailing somebody a $50 check is not really measurable relief for somebody who has earned this money. And so we updated that threshold so that they could get larger lump sum payments, more flexibility for those pensioners, a more sizable amount of money, of their own money, so that they can actually cover some of these extreme costs that we have in our state right now. And on top of that, it's an efficiency bill because when the government is mailing out these micro checks, it's a lot to stuff the mail and do the administration of all of that. And so you're going to be mailing out less checks now, which is actually good for the taxpayer as well. So it's one of those kind of 2-for-1 specials where we got to save a little bit of money by giving a little bit more money of other people's money back to them.
So Representative Couture today sent me some updated information from the department that mails out these checks. And it said that as of 2024, what they call their actuarial valuations, it was about 5,300, what they call PERS to retirees. That's one of the public employee retirement system plans, one of the bigger ones in our state. So 5,300 employees that had monthly pension benefits that were $250 a month or less. So all those people, should they choose to now, would be eligible to take that lump sum payout. And this is also about government efficiency. There wasn't a fiscal note on this about how much money this could potentially save the state and taxpayers as a result. But it reduces the long-term administrative burden on the state because, otherwise you're having this department send out these little tiny, what I think Representative Couture referred to them as micro checks to each of these people. If you're only getting $50 a month or even $100 a month, yeah, that might help, put some gas in the tank. Pretty helpful right now. But if you could instead receive a lump sum payout of several $1,000s, and maybe it's tens of thousands of dollars right now, to pay off some bills and offset some of these other increased expenses rather than get that mini monthly check, it makes sense because then you don't have the state constantly having to process these monthly checks. So we're going to follow this and find out how many people decide to take advantage of this bill. This is one of those bills that didn't get a lot of attention during the session, but might ultimately now be a real benefit to folks in our state who are struggling just to make ends meet. So that's a wrap on today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Again, the income tax signing, waiting for Governor Ferguson to do that. At this point, his calendar for Friday bill signing does not include Senate Bill 6346. That is subject to change. So we're watching it a couple times every day to see what's going on. And we will keep you posted. Again, as always, thank you for watching.